إذن أعزائنا المشاهدين والمتابعين في كل مكان، أهلا بكم مرة تانية في حلقة جديدة من حلقات قناة الآخر أو The Other. النهاردة حلقة خاصة جدا، حلقة مع البروفيسور لورنس كراوس، وهتكون الحلقة تبدأ بعد دقيقة بالظبط، هتكون بالإنجليش بالكامل، ونعدكم في خلال أيام أو يمكن أسابيع قليلة هيتم مراجعتها بالكامل باللغة العربية. هيدير الحلقة معاكم دكتورنا جورج ودكتور شاور.
Anyway, welcome everybody, and Professor Krauss, it's an absolute honor to be speaking with you today. Thank you for accepting our invitation, and welcome to The Other channel. That's the name of our channel. Of course, you don't need any introduction, and we're joined by possibly hundreds of your readers and fans, so better not keep them waiting. And let me just kick off by asking you to share with us your initial interest in studying cosmology and physics, and then what led you to then venture into the world of humanities and ultimately in challenging religious dogma.
That's a very big question. That's I'll try not to take too long to answer it. First of all, it's a pleasure to be with you. I was impressed by your very professional slides at the beginning, and I hope that our discussion will be useful for those who listen. I got interested in science first as a young person, primarily for two reasons. First of all, my mother wanted me to be a doctor, and she made the mistake of telling me doctors were scientists, so I got interested in science. But not just that. I read books by scientists, by well-known scientists, Albert Einstein and Richard Feynman and George Gamow and others, and those excited me. I remember when I was 10 or 11 reading a book about Galileo, and I think that really also inspired me, because not just because of the science, but because of the fact that he seemed so brave to be able to challenge dogma and try and understand the universe. And I think that probably also had an impact on me and on the way I responded and acted after that. So one of the reasons why I write books on science is to return the favor, because people like Feynman and Einstein and others inspired me. I think also some teachers as well. And in fact, when I was in high school, a teacher gave me a book by Richard Feynman on the character of physical law, which had a big impact. It really was the first book that really explained to me that physics wasn't done. It was still very much alive, and there were many open questions in that regard. And I think that was very important. Also a book by a guy named Sir James Jeans on physics and philosophy, which for a while got me interested in the connection between the two, but I overcame that a little bit. And got interested in physics eventually. But my interest in the humanities has always been there. The point is, I was never just interested in science. I've always been interested in ideas, regardless of where they come from, and in the human condition, which I see science as part of. Science is part of our culture. Too often people dissociate it with it. But the questions that everyone asks, like where do we come from and where are we going? Are we alone in the universe? But these are human questions, and humanity is science and culture. The two are vitally tied together. And I've read widely, so I used to do history, for example, before I I took a year off university to work on a history book, and I've always enjoyed reading widely, and I think everyone should. And so I've also been fairly political since I've been very young, and therefore, and because science has such a huge impact in principle, one would like it to have a huge impact on politics and policy. The issues that science discusses are relevant for all of the urgent issues that are facing most countries today, from the economy to security to health and welfare. Science should play a vital part of that, and so it's natural that I'm involved in that. And I think what happened as far as my relationship with religion or dogma is just simply, well, first of all, I just grew out of that. When I was like most kids, I was exposed to that when I was younger, and I just grew out of it like Santa Claus. It just sort of eventually became clear to me that it was kind of fairy tales. And I didn't really get involved in combating that until I saw the threat in the United States when people were initially trying to remove the evolution from high school biology classes. And I really felt the biologists weren't speaking out appropriately. And by then I'd had a somewhat public profile. So I started to speak out, and of course that one thing led to another. And I think it's important to speak out on this issue, not so much because I'm anti-religious necessarily, but because of the dangers it poses to not only free thought, but to people feeling good about themselves, feeling somehow that if they question the reality of a deity, they somehow feel like they're bad people. And questioning is not a bad thing. And that's really what it motivates me. I want to stop those people who would stop people from questioning, because everything should be questioned. Nothing is sacred. Everything should be questioned if we want to eventually get to a better world.
Well,
so that's
take it from here, sir. Well, sorry. First, I apologize about the technical issues I had, but
no worries.
In one of your debates in 2012 with a Muslim guy, Hamza Sources, I don't know how to pronounce his name. He said, and I quote, "Ridiculing ideas is what leads to progress." Are you still abiding by the same, I wouldn't say believe, but ideology? Do you still carry the same idea, or did you change your perspective on that?
Well, first of all, I have very few, I don't have much ideology. I try not to have an ideology. But I think in that context, I was making a point there. But I think nothing should be immune from ridicule. I think ridicule and satire and humor are part of the way we learn. And it exposes things that we are worth thinking about. So I don't go out of my way to ridicule things, but I think I think everything should be open to ridicule as long as it's open to free and honest discussion. And that means not ridiculing it to try and shut it down, but really ridiculing it to raise issues that then lead to useful discussion.
And how do you solve the problem with when you ridicule an idea? Some people with ideas or ideologies, they mix that with themselves, so they take that as ridiculing them.
Well, that's the point. But I said that, I think, even in that debate. I said, right, I don't mind offending, ridiculing ideas. I don't, want to ridicule people. And I think you're right. Too many people internalize that, just as they do with jokes. It's a real problem here in the United States. People take offense at things that are funny to some people. And I've talked to a comedian in England on my podcast, Ricky Gervais, just about that. The fact that if something's funny, it's funny, and people shouldn't, if they take offense, it's a personal thing. But they're not being ridiculed. It's an idea, and no ideas, as I say, are sacred. Some people who hold ideas are sacred somehow feel that they're being attacked if their sacred ideas are ridiculed. But that's their problem, not mine.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You have
let me just say that more than anywhere else in the world, religion in the Arabic or Islamic world is synonymous with morals and ethics. So we would like to hear your thoughts on this. Like, if you're ridiculing religion, you're actually attacking people. And no wonder that's where those three major world religions evolved, really.
Yeah, no, I understand that, and I think that's one of my problems with religion, is that it's kind of usurped morality. And in England, there was a very good example. My friend Richard Dawkins has a foundation there, and in England, about 50% of the people polled by the government, who, when they asked to list their religion, basically said they weren't members of the Church of England anymore, which is a Christian church, and so Richard's foundation went to these people and polled them and said, "Why did you say you're Christian? Do you believe in the virgin birth? Do you believe in transubstantiation? Do you believe in all these things that are part of the Christian religious dogma?" And they said, "No, no, no, no." And then they asked, "Well, why did you list yourself as Christian?" And the answer is, we like to think of ourselves as good people. Because in our society, somehow it's, if you say you don't believe, if you don't believe in a specific religion or God, you are labeled as being immoral. And that's, of course, nonsense. Most people do not derive their morality, no matter what they think. They don't derive their morality from religion. In particular, what they do, even if they do derive their morality from religion, they pick and choose what they, in the Christian religion, they pick and choose what they take out of the Old Testament. They don't take out all the violence and things that we would be abhorrent nowadays, like you should stone your children if they disobey you. They don't believe in that stuff, so they pick and choose what they like. And the reason they pick and choose what they like is that their morality is based on reason and the current climate, of course. And so reason and empirical evidence are really the basis of morality. As I pointed out in numerous occasions, including, by the way, another event where I spoke to a Muslim audience. That one happened to be in Canberra, in Australia, and I asked them. I said, "How many people here, if they didn't believe in God, would kill their neighbor?" And no one put their hand up happily. I think because I don't think most people really derive their morality from that. They try to be good people. They have empathy. They ask, how would I feel if this was being done to me? And that doesn't mean that I don't want to imply for some people they are influenced by their religious beliefs to try and do good things. For some people, they're influenced by their religious beliefs to do bad things, and it can go either way. My friend Steven Weinberg, who won the Nobel Prize in Physics, has put it. I'll paraphrase him. He said, "There are good people and there are bad people. Good people do good things, and bad people do bad things. When good people do bad things, it's religion." That's what he said. So,
one issue that bothers me. Sorry, George, I got to butt in here just very quickly, but why do we still have religion despite it being irrational?
Well, look, I think that's a very good question, and I think the answer is that we're kind of hardwired in a way. Clearly, religion and religious belief has clearly had an evolutionary purpose or evolutionary utility, let me say. Namely, we all have a teleological built-in mechanism. Namely, we look for purpose, even if there isn't purpose. And the reason is quite simple. It's not me who's first proposed this, but I think it's rational. And that is, if you early modern humans living in the savannah in Africa, and you see the leaves rustle, you could say, "Oh, that's nothing," or you could say, "Oh, maybe it's a lion." And the people who said that's nothing got eaten and didn't get to reproduce. So natural selection would naturally choose people who look for purpose even if it isn't there. So I think that's the first thing. Secondly, the universe is a vast and often unforgiving and unfair place. Bad things happen to good people. Senseless things happen, accidents. And so I think people are naturally want the universe to look after them. They feel better if somehow they know they're being taken care of. And that also feeds into what religion fulfills. And then also, to be fair, religion can build a sense of community. Tribalism, if you wish, which early in early modern humans was quite useful. The in-groups versus the out-groups. It built, people of a certain religion can share a certain commonality, which sometimes helps them together and also sometimes helps them defeat quote-unquote enemies. And so the sense of community that for many people religion provides, I think, is vital. And in the United States, again, where I can speak more with some more authority, I suppose, the fact that people go to church every week for them builds a sense of community, and it helps people feel, it helps build that, and that. But by the same token, that promotes the religion and the institution of religion. And the fact of another friend of mine who's a very famous American actor named Alan Alda, in a conversation we had once, no, it wasn't Alan Alda, sorry, it was Hugh Downs, who's another famous American broadcaster, said to me once, it's interesting to me that people have to go to church every Sunday to reaffirm their belief in God. It must mean it's pretty tenuous, because you don't have to go to physics class every week and reaffirm your belief in quantum mechanics. And so, anyway, I thought that was an interesting observation.
In one of your meetings with Dr. Dawkins, you were talking about coming from biology, back to chemistry, back to physics. So back to that debate you had with that Sortes guy, if you're made of stuff, how do you get morality out of stuff? How can you say that this is right or wrong? That's the question, very famous question we get asked as non-religious people all the time.
Sure.
If you're just stuff, why is killing somebody considered to be wrong, or where did you get the morality from?
Well, I mean, look, we don't know the answers. The first answer is we don't know. But as I've often said, not knowing something is not evidence of God. It's evidence of not knowing. But I think it's important to realize that that's true for everything we think, not just morality. I mean, consciousness, as a basic consciousness, is an interesting area. We don't understand how a complex system that eventually forms a brain can have consciousness. But I think very few scientists suspect that that's an impossible question that we'll never answer. It's just a complicated question. Now, it is also true, as David Hume, the philosopher, said, reason is the slave of passion. And it's probably true that when our sense of rationality undoubtedly is colored by emotional passions based on our own background and other things, and we often rationalize decisions that we think are rational but are really based on something we wanted to be true in the first place. Fundamentally, we all want to believe. But I think there's nothing special about morality. It's an issue of consciousness more generally. And arguing that you don't understand how a set of atoms that can turn into molecules, that can turn into complex polymers that could eventually transmit electrical signals, produce consciousness, to say that you don't understand it and therefore there must be God is just a huge leap. There's probably lots of things you don't understand, and in the old days, that's exactly what happened. People looked out at the universe and much of it was incomprehensible, and they attributed God to almost everything. And then as we've learned how Newton's law of gravity and then general relativity, we've learned how the cosmos works. The domain in which God operates, if you wish, in the physical world has been shrinking continuously since the rise of science, and that's okay.
Yeah, one thing we always get as well, we always get this comment is what's the meaning or purpose of life then if there's no God or no afterlife, no punishment for the bad and no reward for the good? We always get that comment. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, well, again, it's a good question. The answer is that we make our own meaning. There isn't it may be depressing for some people that there's no cosmic purpose to our existence, but there is no evidence that there's a cosmic purpose to our existence. There's no evidence that the universe cares about us or was created for us. It's scientifically. Now, again, for some people that's depressing, but for me, if you think, and I think for others, I hope, if you think about it appropriately, it's actually energizing and uplifting, because it means this incredible cosmic accident that led to the development of life on our planet and eventually the development of living objects that have intelligence and consciousness has allowed us to be a part of a system that can look around the universe, look around outside and ask questions and experience the beauty and wonder of the universe, the beauty and wonder of human interactions. So there may be no cosmic purpose, but we make our own purpose in that regard, and we should value every moment of life becomes more precious, not because there's a cosmic marionette holder pulling the strings, but because we're here, we have a brief moment underneath the sun, and we should make every moment, every instant of our life more useful and more valuable by experiencing and enjoying life. So I think the fact that there's no cosmic meaning doesn't mean that we cannot make meaning in our own lives. We can choose our meaning to be loving and caring for our children or our neighbors, or creating a beautiful symphony, or simply enjoying music or art or literature. And there's nothing wrong with that.
We issued some sort of a campaign through this channel to prohibit teaching religion in school. And I heard you saying once that you liken that to actually child abuse.
Yeah, I'm not. Yeah, I mean, I think compulsory religious education is something that's pernicious, but I don't go so far as to prohibit. For example, I think in a history class, or a world history class, or a social studies class, discussing world religions is incredibly important, because let's face it, religion has been an important part of human civilization and been relevant for the development of society. So I would hate to see people not be able to study world religions in that context. But taking religious dogma and teaching it in class as if it's fact, that's child abuse. And moreover, it's child abuse for the following reason. A, because it's sometimes lying about the reality, but more important, it seems to me, is that children, especially young children, are not capable. The issues that religion supposedly tries to deal with, including not just the divine, but moral and ethical issues as well, those things are very, very complex. And children are too young to deal with the subtle notions that need to be discussed. Talk about divinity or free will and all the rest. And it's unfair to teach it to young kids, because what it does is it imposes it as brainwashing on them. It's very hard to overcome. And so that's what I mean by it's child abuse. I think children are just too young to deal with those kind of issues. I don't mind it being discussed among adults, and just like I don't think any ideas should be censored. They should be openly discussed so you can see what's ridiculous and what isn't.
Well, are you sensing a change in the world as religion being minimized or contained, the role of religion in our society?
Well, it's certainly in the West. It's certainly happening, but I think to some extent worldwide. But I'm not much of an expert. I was just reading a piece actually, which listed me among other people partly responsible for people giving up religion, which was amusing. But
we would attest to that.
Okay, but more importantly, it turned out that all the polls in the West, at least, and some even more globally, including other areas, are showing monotonically a decline in religious belief. It's certainly true in the Christian world that every year fewer and fewer people declare themselves religious or Christian. And that's new. It's new in the last century. The rise of religion increased. And so up until the last century and until recent times. So I think we're finding among young people less and less religiosity. Now, to be fair, that is often replaced by other kind of sort of spirituality, New Age spirituality often, and because people seem to still have this innate need for something beyond what they can see. And science says that there's a lot more in the universe that we can see, but people have an innate need that somehow that there's this something related to them, behind the world they see, somehow there's something taking care of them. So even the people who are giving up religion, many of them are somehow seek some other kind of spirituality. And what I'd like to have happen is that the people find their spirituality in science. That science is certainly spiritual. The image that's on the backdrop of the screen I'm looking at right now comes from telescopes. And when you look out at these incredible images from the Hubble Space Telescope and others, you can't help but feel awe and wonder and many of the spiritual feelings that people have when they may go to church, let's say. And so it would be great if we could replace one spirituality with another. But it's certainly happening, and some people will bemoan it happening, will be upset that it's happening. But I don't think it's a bad thing, as long as we ultimately, as long as we try and ensure that people continue to try and be more ethical and deal responsibly and rationally with their neighbors. People often, by the way, talk about something they call the loss of faith. And I think already that's like an advertising slogan, because it suggests if you stop believing in something that you somehow lose something. But certainly not believing in fictional gods you don't lose anything. You gain if you then start to learn about the real world. So there's no loss there, and I think we should stop using those terms.
So, sir, when you say spirituality, I'm just as a physician, I've never studied something called the spirit or the soul.
Well, by spirituality, you're absolutely right. There's no soul. There's no evidence of soul. But spirituality has some meaning, however tenuous it is. Usually it means something like a sense of wonder, awe, and connection to the universe. Well, whatever you want. All of those things I get from science. So I don't ever use the term spirituality myself. It has no meat and real. It doesn't resonate with me. But for many people, the word means something. And for them, I'd like them to understand that you don't have to lose that. All of the emotional crutches or pleasantries you get from what you call spirituality by giving up a belief in nonsense. The real world is remarkable. You don't need all the nonsense.
Maybe this is a good time to tell Professor Krauss about our established religion. We've started a sarcastic religion, and we have our own god that is the tap washer.
Okay.
We've made up a tap washer god, and George is his prophet. So.
That's good. I have another one here. It's called the flying spaghetti monster, which I'm sure you've heard. Yeah, and which was sent to me and always amusing to me. So I think the point, and it's kind of interesting because with people with that flying spaghetti monster, one of the reasons I like it is that, as you probably are aware of, in a number of countries, people have tried to have it established as a viable religion by wearing Pastafarians, by wearing colanders on their head, and in certain countries they've been able to have their driver's license with a colander on their head. And other people say, well, that's not a religion, that's just silly. And of course, I think their point, as your point, is that, well, it's no more silly than a number of the other world's religions.
Yeah, we're working on making a big tap washer for people to put
on their heads.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. Well, one question we just received, actually: do you think religion impacts negatively on scientific progress?
It can. It doesn't have to. I mean, there are lots of devoutly religious. There are a number of devoutly religious scientists. They're in the minority, but there are some. The question is, do you let it interfere with your science? And a very famous biologist, Haldane, years ago said, well, every scientist, when they go into their laboratory, becomes an atheist when they're in their laboratory, because they don't think any being is twiddling the knobs and dials on their machines. And when they go to their laboratory, as he said, when I go to my laboratory, I'm an atheist too. But some scientists, when they go out of their laboratory, aren't atheists, because humans can believe two impossible things at the same time. So if you don't let your religious beliefs interfere with the open inquiry and testing and accepting what evidence the universe gives you, then it doesn't get in the way. But for many people, of course, it does. And that's a problem, because somehow when science disagrees with their sacred texts, then they say, well, the science must be wrong, and of course that's not the case. So, and even in the Christian world, Saint Augustine said a long time ago, almost 2,000 years ago, that as he put it, the scriptures are absolutely true, but if your interpretation of the scriptures disagrees with the results of science, you should re-examine your interpretation of the scriptures. So even he said that about that. Now, so I think the point is, the real problem is that the problem with religion is people say they absolutely know the truth. They know the answer before you even ask the question. And therefore anything that gets in the way of that knowledge of the truth because of some 2,000-year-old book must be wrong. And of course that's the wrong attitude, because experiment and evidence to tell us how the world works, not revelation.
So when I see intelligent people try to solve that debate when they're religious, and I want to find out how you debate that. They say that science is not complete yet, didn't figure out everything yet, so science is not mature enough now to understand that sacred text or whatever. How do you
Well, I mean, I think the point is, let's ask, we're having this conversation on Zoom using a computer, using technology that was created with the science, okay? what if we just had the sacred texts, we wouldn't be having this conversation. talking about maturity. What is produced in terms of maturity? What's more mature? Well, I think science actually has made a lot more progress in the last 500 years than theology. And I've actually asked theologians to try and counter that argument, and none of them has ever been able to.
Fantastic. Go ahead.
Knowing that you have a very limited time, we have three physics questions. We didn't let this opportunity pass without asking you some physics questions. And believe it or not, we received this eternal question, why is there something rather than nothing? And I would like you to ultimately comment on that, but could we just start by something else for now?
Okay, sure.
The first question is, and please, Patty, could you put it there we are.
Oh,
does
zero
energy...
Okay, well, it's a very good question. It requires me to unpack that a lot for people who don't know anything about astronomy or cosmology. The point is that we now observe, and one of the things that I first proposed in a way was that the energy of empty space has the dominant energy in the universe, which is really weird. You get rid of all the particles and radiation and everything, and space will still weigh something. It has energy. We still don't understand where it comes from, but that accounts for about 70% of the energy of the universe, and it's profoundly changed our thinking about the universe. Now, at the same time, I've argued that if you wanted to create a universe from nothing by quantum mechanics, one of the requirements generally would be that the total energy of that universe would be zero. And interestingly enough, and our universe, as far as we can see, our universe, in fact, has zero total energy, and also has this repulsive energy called dark energy. So the bottom line is that gravitational energy can come with two different signs, positive and negative, and they can add up together to be zero. And so you can have dark energy permeating the universe, just like you can have 100 billion galaxies, each having 100 billion stars, and still have a universe with zero total energy, which seems very counterintuitive, but it can be true. And ultimately, to answer that question and the other question that in some sense you've implicitly already asked, if you asked yourself, how could a universe come from nothing spontaneously, and what would the characteristics of a universe that spontaneously arose from nothing by, say, quantum mechanics, and lasted 14 billion years, what would the characteristics of that universe look like? And they happen to be exactly the characteristics of the universe we see. So, does that prove that our universe was spontaneously created from nothing by quantum mechanics, a space and time, and just spontaneously appeared? No, it doesn't prove that. But it says it's highly suggestive. It says if that mechanism happened, what would the universe look like? Well, it would look just like the universe in which we live. It's highly suggestive. And so that's where we're at. We don't have the physics that describes the creation of our universe, but we do know that we can say quite generally that if our universe was created spontaneously without any supernatural shenanigans and had zero total energy and lasted 14 billion years, it would look just like the universe we see.
I think this question had another section. If we can, you probably answered that.
Well, I mean, I don't know what you mean by self-sufficient. The point is that we don't know all the physics of the universe, but it does indicate. I think I know the intent of the question. It does indicate that there's nothing, that you don't necessarily need a driving force, namely a conscious intelligence, to create a universe. That there's no evidence of that, and every reason to expect that that's not the case.
Well, when you talked about nothing, I think you said that even the laws of physics themselves can spring up without.
Okay, I see this question.
Oh yeah, well, that's a different question, but just to follow on from the previous one.
Okay, and then we'll get to that one. Okay.
Yeah. So the laws of physics themselves, how could the laws of physics themselves come?
Well, I mean, the laws of physics that we see are actually an accident for our existence. If the Higgs field that we've now discovered, which permeates all of empty space in our universe, it actually determines the laws of physics that we actually measure here on Earth. And if it had relaxed in a different configuration, then the laws we'd measure would be quite different. The photon, the carrier of electromagnetism, has zero mass. The carrier of the weak force is very massive. and those forces look very, very different. But fundamentally, they're exactly the same. They represent different sides of a unified theory. It's only because the Higgs field relaxed in a certain way that certain particles that interact with that background field behave differently than other particles. So the laws we experience are already kind of an accident of our existence, and one could imagine, for example, universes in which the Higgs field relaxes in a different way, and then the laws would look different. But you can also imagine that at a more fundamental scale, if the universe comes into existence, the ground state of whatever physics actually governs the universe could have many different ways of manifesting itself, and in certain universes it manifests itself with certain measured laws of physics, and other universes that are created manifest itself other ways. So that's quite speculative, but certainly in the case of our Higgs particle, there's a real example of how the laws we measure are really kind of an accident of our existence. Now, okay, I want to answer that question. Well, before you get to it, because it came up before. In an early universe, look, matter and antimatter are essentially equivalent in physics. They both weigh the same, or have the same mass, have the same properties. And in the early universe, we would have expected naturally an equal amount of matter and antimatter. The big question, and something of great interest, is how can we dynamically start with a universe that has equal amounts of matter and antimatter and end up with a universe which has a little bit more matter than antimatter, so that all the matter and antimatter that were equal get annihilated and produce radiation, but the little bit of matter left over accounts for all the 100 billion galaxies we see. And we have many theories of that. We don't know which one of them is true, and we're trying to test them, and it's one of the most interesting areas in fundamental physics. But matter and antimatter are essentially equivalent for the most part as far as physics is concerned. They're not. Antimatter falls in a gravitational field. An anti-atom would look just like a regular atom if it was made of antiparticles. And anti-people would look just like people. And anti-lovers under an anti-moon would feel the same wonder, etc.
We get that point every time we debate one of the religious people. Just to follow up on that last question and also that last question, how do you the fine-tuning? How do you explain the fine-tuning?
Well, look, I mean, there are certain quantities in our universe that appear to be fine-tuned. We don't know if they're fine-tuned. They appear to be different than we would have imagined, but that we don't know whether they're really fine-tuned. And even if they are, the point is that may once again just be a consequence of our existence, if you wish. Namely, you might say, why are my legs exactly the right length to just reach the ground? Why are they not? Why don't they too short or too long? And it sounds like they're fine-tuned to be exactly right to reach the ground. But they reach the ground because the laws of gravity tell us. So something that may appear to be fine-tuned may not be fine-tuned at all. Similarly, we can say, well, we're fine-tuned for the universe in which we exist. Namely, we would find ourselves very surprised to live in a universe in which we couldn't exist, right? Just like an intelligent fish would ask the question, why is the universe made of water? The answer was, if it wasn't, you wouldn't be around to ask the question. And so rather than saying the universe is fine-tuned for us, the universe has a certain configuration, and within that configuration, life like us was able to evolve. And we say, isn't it remarkable the universe has just the right characteristics for us to evolve? Well, it's really the other way around. But more than that, the universe in most places doesn't have the right characteristics for us to evolve. Most of the time, the universe is trying to kill us. Most of the time, if you look at the vast majority of the universe, life is uninhabitable. We happen to live in a remote corner where it is, so it's not as if the universe is fine-tuned for us. I have to just hold on. I have to go out and answer this. I'll be right back. I'll have to answer the door.
Sure. We still have a couple of physics questions.
حتى يعود دكتور لورانس كراوس، احنا معاكم. مبسوط بالحلقة حتى الآن. الراجل بصراحة متواضع جدا ومتشكرين ليه. احنا بنتكلم بالعربي للناس اللي بتتابعنا ان هو قبل الدعوه وان هو معانا، ومشكورين كلكم يعني الناس اللي موجوده في اللايف شات اللي بيرحبوا بيه. اتمنى لو الترحيب يبقى بالانجلش هنقدر اعرضه عشان برضه هو يقراه. يعني اللي فيكم يقدر يكتب بالانجلش نكتبه في اخر الحلقه، هنعرض كل الترحيب وهو وصل تاني. وفاصل ونعود.
Your life has a wonderful way of intervening, so that's good.
I know you're very busy, so
No, it's okay. Now I was expecting that in 15 minutes. It came now, so that's okay. Anyway, yes, go on.
it's not fine-tuned.
Yeah, you got to roll with the punches. Okay.
We have a third question. I'm well aware of your commitments. We have a number of questions actually, but there's the third physics question.
Okay.
And Fatty, if you can show that. Is the black hole black because light cannot escape it, or because what falls in it is accelerated by its gravity past the speed of light?
The simplest answer is that light simply can't escape a black hole. In general relativity, what really happens is that the space at the event horizon of a black hole curves in on itself, and so light can't, since the space is basically separated from our universe, there's no way that light can get around out of that space because the space curves in on itself. But quite simply, the other way of thinking about it is that the escape velocity from what's called the event horizon of a black hole is the speed of light. Inside of that, the escape, you need to go faster than light to escape, classically, and things can't go faster than light. So inside, at the event horizon of a black hole, nothing can escape because nothing can travel faster than light. But it also means outside the black hole, things can escape. It's not as if everything has to fall into a black hole. You could orbit a black hole just like you can orbit a star, because as long as you're outside the event horizon of a black hole, then you don't have to travel at the speed of light to escape its gravitational pull.
I think the questioner wanted to know if whatever falls in a black hole actually adds to its mass or something like that. That was my understanding.
Well, that wasn't the question, but yes, certainly what falls into a black hole adds to its mass, and as long as what falls in has a positive energy. It turns out things can fall in with negative energy and then they can reduce the mass of a black hole, and that happens. That's what happens. Black holes eventually evaporate because virtual particles are created outside the edge of a black hole, and when one of the particles falls in, it can have negative energy and it reduces the mass of the black hole. And black holes, as Stephen Hawking showed, eventually evaporate. They're actually hot, and they release, and as they evaporate and radiate with what's now called Hawking radiation, they get hotter and hotter and hotter and smaller and smaller and smaller until potentially they disappear, and we just don't know what happens at the last moment of black hole evaporation. But that's a whole different question.
Sure. Well, back to this matter and antimatter business. Are there regions in the universe where the production of matter is more than the production of the antimatter, and vice versa? And what we ultimately have is the universe we live in?
Well, no. As far as we can see, we see no regions in the universe that have that basically are made of antimatter. Originally, that was one of the ideas that people thought about. Maybe there were pockets. Maybe there were pockets of matter, pockets of antimatter, and the universe on the whole had equal amounts of matter and antimatter. But in certain regions, they were dominated by matter. In certain regions, they were dominated by antimatter, but that hypothesis appears not to be true. Everywhere we look in the universe, antimatter appears to be, basically more or less absent. There's some small amount of antimatter coming in cosmic rays, and that's because when energetic particles collide, they produce lots of particles, including antiparticles. But there's no evidence that there are regions where the key thing is if you had regions of matter and antimatter, there'd be regions in the center where matter and antimatter were meeting, and huge amounts of energy would be released, and there's no evidence of such things. So as far as we can see, we live in a universe of matter, and that's all that matters.
Well, enough questions about physics. For a biologist, I need time to fathom that.
Okay, good. Because
I'm sure you understand.
Well, yeah, no, I can understand that. I mean, I'm my pity on biologists. No, I'm just joking because I've often said that I'm a physicist and not a biologist because physics is so much simpler.
Of
So,
course, of
yeah,
course,
yeah,
I would agree with that.
yeah.
So,
Anyway,
if we're to go back to some questions posed by friends and audience, um, what this part of the world, the Arabic Islamic world, it's very difficult for somebody to brush off their beliefs or religion. First of all, the society doesn't encourage you to even question your beliefs, and let alone dump them all together. So, if you're to give a word of advice to people in this part of the world, tell them what they could do when they start questioning their ideology, established ideology.
okay. Well, let me just point out it's not unique to that part of the world. I see it in the United States all the time in small towns and Southern American towns where people come up to me and say they're so happy to have seen, say, our movie The Unbelievers because they see that they're not alone. They feel like they're alone and they're bad. So the first thing you should do if you're starting to question beliefs is realize that everyone does. Most people just hide it. And also realize that questioning doesn't make you a bad person. So you shouldn't feel bad about yourself just for asking questions. And realize that you're not alone, that everyone has questioned their beliefs at one time or another. And I think that's probably the most important thing, because I think it's people's guilt and fear that they're bad that stops them from doing it. But the next thing I would say is that no one can tell you what to think. It doesn't mean you have to, if you're worried about your safety or your family or your friends or your position, it doesn't mean you have to proselytize. You don't have to proselytize for atheism, but you just, you know what, you can feel satisfied in knowing what you think. So your own circumstances should determine your interactions with other people. And I don't want anyone to, I want people to remain safe, and I don't want people to be put in danger because of their beliefs necessarily. It's, you know, it's some people have the luxury of speaking their mind, and I, on the whole, some of the time have that luxury. And but so the main thing is realizing you're not evil, realizing you're not alone, that everyone feels that way, and realizing that you are free to think and determine your own view of the world without anyone telling you what to do, even if you don't speak about it. The next thing is there are lots of resources on the web to learn about the real world, and you should feel free to exploit all of the educational opportunities available to you. So even if you're constrained by your society and your family or your parents or whatever, there's a German expression that they used to say, and I think especially at the time of the Holocaust, that "Die Gedanken sind frei," thoughts are free, because you can always, no one can stop you from thinking what you want to think.
Excellent. George, you got something to say?
Yeah. So, what's your opinion on that, sir? In the channel, in this channel here, we do both things. We try to promote science, and also we try to clash head on with religion. We're more heavily on that, heavy on clashing on with the religion more than promoting science. Which one? Because I've seen some people, they're atheists on the inside, but they'll talk nothing about religion. They'll just try to promote science, and they will hope that people will drop these childish ideas of religion. So which one do you think is we should heavily?
Well, I don't give advice in general, but let me just say that it takes all types. That I've had this discussion with my friend Richard Dawkins, because earlier on, before when we first met, I used to argue, look, you can bash religion, I try and promote science, and I think it's more useful. And then, of course, we merged more in both of our views, and I think the point is that just different strokes for different folks. It takes 1,000 points of light. I keep using these well-worn analogies, but what I mean is that, look, for some people, learning about the real universe is enough to break the spell, if you wish, of religion. For other people, sometimes they have to be confronted with the internal contradictions and realizations and the dangers and sometimes evils of religion. So certain people resonate with certain things, and I understand if you're coming from a society in which feels repressive because of religion, that there's a great motivation to speak out against it, and particularly if you're able to do it safely. If you're able to do it safely with people if you're outside the country or wherever, and you're able to safely try and say things that could never be said in that country, I understand the desire to speak out in those regards, and maybe that's useful because certainly science per se is not necessarily repressed. I mean, cosmology may not be repressed. There are physics departments and things in all sorts of repressive societies, but other ideas are. So I can understand that desire on your part, but I can't speak for you. You should do what you can do best and try and educate people as best you can in the best way you can.
Obviously, we're approaching the end of this session, so I would like to ask you, are you optimistic about the future of humanity in terms of minimizing the impact of religion?
I'm optimistic and pessimistic on alternate days. I forget what day it is today. I think. Look, I think education can help overcome ignorance, and that's why I keep trying to educate. There are many, many forces that counter that try and preserve ignorance, preserve hatred, preserve bias, and it's an uphill battle. And I don't know how it will. I don't make predictions about which side will win at any moment or another. I just do what I think is necessary to do, and I am sad about the situation in the world in many ways. I'm not naive. I recognize many of the world's problems, but I'm optimistic that at least an attempt to educate people can make the world a little bit better, and that's all I try and care about.
Well, fantastic. George, you got anything to say, or?
I have no more questions.
Okay, well, it's
good time to end.
Fantastic that we're optimistic at least.
Well, yeah,
So,
I mean, why not? I think I'm an optimistic person by nature, in the sense that I think, hope springs eternal. What can I say?
I think we have to have a little bit of optimism at least.
Well, I think science, I think a little bit of optimism helps, but beside that kind of touchy-feely version, more importantly for me, in some sense, science has made me optimistic, because every day the universe surprises me, and so that means there's a reason to keep on going. Okay?
Just before we go, it's very important that now that you're here, we'd like to acknowledge three main people, three main free thinkers and writers who, if not for them, we wouldn't be here speaking to you that openly and that candidly. And those people, if we can project their images on screen, it's very important to pay tribute to those three great men, Dr. Nasr Hamid Abu Zaid, Dr. Farag Fouda, and Dr. Sayed Al-Qimani. They are great people. They helped us a great deal, and it's very important that we introduce you to them or make them known to you.
Well, I'm glad to be known. Because I'm glad you've done that, because of course there's a lot of there are a lot of people who need to be celebrated in this regard, and some of us have for one reason or another gotten some attention for what we do, and I appreciate that. But people sometimes say we're brave, and I'm not particularly brave compared to many of the people who are saying things in places where it's far riskier to say things, and so I herald them and applaud their efforts.
Thank you for saying that. That's exactly what we wanted to do here. As you say, it's a very dangerous part of the world, and two of them actually paid really dearly. But if not for their efforts, we wouldn't be here today. Professor Krauss, I hate to end this session without at least feeling reassured that this wouldn't be the last session to have with you. So hopefully in the future, we can have another session. I'm sure that we will be receiving hundreds of questions and comments that we might be able to share with you some other time in the future.
Absolutely. I enjoyed it, and I'd love to do it again. I think it's important, and maybe when my new book comes out or something. And
Sure.
And yeah, thanks. And I don't know if this gets archived and put online, but if you let me know about it, I'll certainly try and promote it as well, so people learn
It
about
will
what
be
you're doing.
online. And when is your book being published?
Oh, it won't come out till at the very earliest the end of this year. It's finished, but it takes time to publish. So it'll either be the end of this year or at the latest by late January. So
All right,
so
that's
stay
not a
tuned.
very long time.
No,
That's not
so
a very
exactly.
long time.
So stay
So
tuned.
we could probably meet then, and we can talk about the book.
Yeah. Okay. That'd be great.
Will you include the corona pandemic in that, or?
Well, there's some. The book was written during the pandemic, so there's mention of it. But well, anyway, you wait and see.
Well, that's to my interest, as a physician.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Well, I'm not a physician, so that's important to know. Okay. Okay.
We
Okay.
will wait and see and read the book. Thank you, Mr. Lawrence. Thank you, Dr. George, Mr.
It was a great
Chow.
honor, sir, today.
Thank you. It was
Thank
an
you
honor to be on.
all. شكرا لكل الناس اللي تابعونا. نلقاكم في حلقة جديدة على قناة الآخر وتصبحوا على خير.